The notice requirements have been satisfied. The meeting dates for the year are confirmed at the annual meeting are posted on the public bulletin board in the lobby of the municipal center and published in the record within the first 10 days of the new year. Salute to the flag, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please, Omar.
Councilmember Dayton,
Here.
Councilmember Grossman,
Here.
Councilmember Menon.
Here.
Councilmember Michaels,
Present.
Councilmember Dr. O'Connor.
Here.
Councilmember Park. Here. Mayor Zena.
Here. Okay, the next item on the agenda, David Novak is here to give us a presentation regarding and discussion items for the borough regarding borough zoning topics. David, come up to the microphone. Tell us who you are and
Hello, good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me tonight.
thanks for being
My name
here.
is David Novak. I am a planner and one of the principals with Burgess Associates. Been the planning consultants for the borough for a number of years. I was just relaying to your business administrator that Tenafly was the first re-examination report and master plan I ever worked on about 11 or 12 years ago. So it's been nice working with you guys for all that time.
Good.
So tonight we're going to be discussing some planning and zoning issues and questions that came in. Your BA was nice enough to email me a couple questions specifically, so I'll address those first. And then any questions that pop up during this short little presentation, obviously feel free to interrupt me, ask those questions. Planning and zoning is something we love talking about, so we relish that opportunity all the time. So the first question that we received was regarding side yards and densities. Essentially, the question was if we increase the required side yard setback for new home construction and improvements, I believe science supports that the increase to our pervious surfaces will help mitigate flooding and lower temperature, as well as have other benefits. Should the town be planning for increasing side yard and reducing housing density? And if so, how much benefit can this result concerning the issues mentioned above? So that is a very good question. It's a very tough question to answer. I did prepare a short presentation to accompany some of this. One of the reasons that we started addressing these questions, though, is climate change. So in this presentation, we included a link to the 2020, let me get it up on my screen because my eyes are very bad. The 2020 report on climate change at a glance that was released by the NJBPP, which discussed some of the repercussions that the state had been seeing regarding climate change. First, obviously, one of the things that comes to mind first is temperature changes. So the state's average temperature has increased 3.5 degrees since 1895. And heat waves are expected to impact larger areas more frequently and for longer durations by 2050. That has a direct relationship to weather. The hotter it is, the more evaporation is, the more extreme weather events we get. So annual precipitation is expected to increase by 4% to 11% by 2050. Extreme weather events are expected to increase by 71% over the next 50 years. And the cruel paradox of this is that droughts are actually expected to increase as well, due to the infrequent or extreme fluctuations of those weather events. Regarding water, the ocean is 30% more acidic since the Industrial Revolution. There's a 50% chance that sea level rise will meet or exceed 1.4 feet by 2050, and surface and groundwater quality will be impaired due to increased nutrients contaminants into the water. And then finally, air quality is a major impacted factor from climate change as well. So going back to the question regarding side yard setbacks and density, I won't go through all the zoning standards that you'll see behind you. We have our zoning standards for our residential zones. On the next slide, we have our zoning standards for non-residential zones. And then after that, we have additional standards for how we measure and regulate impervious coverage, which is based on the size of the lot for residential zoning districts. And then after that, we have another slide which discusses our regulations regarding the rear yard coverage in some of our non-residential zones. So that's just more for if we need to look up what those zoning criteria are, if anybody has any specific questions. We go to the next slide. Speaking on a very general basis and a very broad and theoretical basis, the answer to the question is yes. If you have less coverage, that's generally better than more coverage. But once you start getting to the specifics and really start looking at site-specific items, as well as looking at the problem from a regional perspective, answer isn't necessarily all that easy. So This slide identifies where the borough is in North Jersey, specifically where that little red municipality right along the eastern coast. The blue outline that surrounds us, as well as good charts showing Bergen County and Hudson County, there's our watershed management area. Watershed management area is the area of land that drains into a body of water, such as river, lake, stream, or so that's the watershed area that we're dealing with when we talk about flooding, other climate-related issues regarding stormwater regulations. So what we do on a micro level in Tenafly is important for mitigation purposes, but we're still dealing with the repercussions of that entire watershed area. So it becomes that much more of a challenge to appropriately deal with these items due to that regional nature. One of the other challenging aspects of dealing with stormwater and flooding is what we're really looking to regulate with stormwater. So the NJDEP recently updated its regulations to manage stormwater from 3 different components or perspectives. Groundwater recharge, which is the water that infiltrates the ground and reaches the water table. Water quality, which is the measurement of stormwater pollutant removal. And then peak flow control, which is the maximum rate of discharge during a period of runoff. So it's 3 things: how quickly the water is getting back into the water table, how clean that water is, and what the sheeting of water is. When we say sheeting, water going from one property to the next. How do we control that sheeting? So while on a very general and broad basis, less coverage is better than more coverage, it really does get site specific, and it really depends on the certain unique features or functions of a piece of land, because there is a theoretical possibility that you could have a vacant piece of land that's just a lawn, where during rain events, it sheets off and floods onto adjoining properties. Whereas a piece of property that has some sort of development on there with proper stormwater regulation management controls can actually retain that water on site longer and better than just a lawn piece of property.
Can I ask an interrupting question? Is there anything new in the industry that we should be having in these setbacks between properties to avoid the runoff? Because a lot of what I'm hearing, and I don't know, Jeff, you would know this best, being on the planning board, is that the water flow between the properties. We get a lot of calls, especially during, obviously, the rainstorms, but even so, of a little bit of soil erosion or movement and the water flow between the 2 housing. I mean, yes, back, obviously Tenafly is one large hill, so we have everything coming down the hills. But this is really just between as well. So
it's a great question, and actually leads into what I was about to just bring up too, because there are other mechanisms that you can do besides controlling your side yard setback or impervious coverage. Really, it's something that examines typically on a lot by lot basis as a house is developed. But generally, one of the things that's tried and tested and not necessarily new would be developing a swale in the vicinity of those property lines, right? So a swale is an indentation into the topography, which is going to direct groundwater or stormwater rather away from adjoining properties. Another mechanism could be a dry well. So dry wells have been utilized frequently. Essentially, it's a subsurface container that's either some sort of chamber or filled with little rocks and gravel in there. So
Like the retention tanks that are required now?
I'm sorry?
Like the retention tank?
Like a French drain, some people call it, has multiple names, but dry well is kind of the proper name. That slows off the rate of groundwater recharge. And it promotes infiltration and recharge, and it filters pollutants. Other mechanisms are pervious asphalt and pervious pavers, which maybe not appropriate in a side yard area, but another mechanism that municipalities look to. Cisterns, which is basically a container, could be above grade, below grade, at grade, on top of the building. It's a large container that can collect rainwater during events. Bioretention systems like rain gardens, for example, also much more beneficial to slow the rate of runoff and improve groundwater recharge than just typical lawn area. That being said, there's not a one-size-fits-all solution. So each one of those things that I came up with have certain limitations to them as well. So a dry well may not work if the soils are very clay-like or if the water table is very high. Pervious asphalt and pervious pavers. If the planning board engineer, David Halls, was here, he would shake his head because he always complains that property owners will never maintain those because you need to actually maintain and vacuum them every so often. Cisterns are best used when you have a use on the site where you can empty that water within 72 hours. Otherwise, your health department is going to complain a lot about mosquitoes in the area. Bioretention systems at rain gardens, one of my favorite things, but it also does require a education process with homeowners so they don't mow that rain garden later and have more lawn area. So there's a lot of green infrastructural techniques that we can promote in those side yard areas to slow water runoff on adjoining properties.
So. Obviously, something like trees would be another strategy. But not just trees, but placement of trees. So, we have a lot of people who are, in town that are clear cutting, getting rid of, or they're trading in major trees for minor trees.
Mhm.
And the minor trees end up being, in a lot of cases, those, what they call the arborvitaes.
Yes.
And there's very little impact or effect of that. But does it also matter, where the trees are located and?
It does. Not just from an engineering perspective, but also from a heat island perspective. One of the recommendations that was made in the 2023 re-examination report of the master plan by the planning board was to encourage street tree requirements in residential zoning districts. So right now, we really only
Encourage
require
what?
shade trees.
Shade tree. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, shade trees in residential zoning districts. Right now, we really only require shade trees in non-residential districts. The recommendation was, as houses develop and they replace these trees, they really focus them on the interior of the lot, and there's not as much as we see on the exterior along the street. So when you're walking up and down the sidewalk and you're basking in the sun like it was today, 90 degrees, you're not getting that shade protection from a tree. So in terms of bioretention, and it's in terms of trying to fight back against heat islands, which a heat island is when you're walking somewhere and there's no shade and you're sweating. Those would be another mechanism to combat that.
Go ahead, Lauren, then Jeff.
My question is, in reviewing our ordinances, I feel like we have a lot of these suggestions, but they're not requirements. Is there anything that we can do that would be a required step in a planning process for a new home or business? That we could add essentially to what we're looking here is, are there recommendations that we could implement into the ordinances? We could say, you could suggest these things, but essentially that's what we're at now. And correct me if I'm wrong, I'm looking for, you must go through this analysis in the ordinance and decide which one of them to put in.
Yes.
I just want to ask a question, just for clarification. What do you mean suggestions? So, the
Right now-
construction and the tree rules are pretty set.
No, in terms of erosion and water into neighboring properties, in terms of water runoff into the streets and down into backyards,
Okay.
downhill. Right now, we are, can you look for a French drain? Can you put this? Sometimes properties deep enough to require a French drain on the edges or require water runoff plans, but not every time. And what we're seeing, of course, is an increase in stormwater, increase in flooding, increase in storms. I'm trying to be proactive, edit our ordinances now to go through a process where the planning board says, now you need to pick, or we are, as a planner, suggesting this is now the analysis for every house.
So how does it work with the current ordinances
Right.
of requiring water to stay on the property, and then Jeff, your next?
We're taking care of it.
So the borough adopted a new stormwater ordinance when the NJDEP came out, but that only applies to major developments. It does not apply to individual single-family dwellings, unless you're part of a new development or subdivision. So our office doesn't usually, we're not the ones that review, say, a new single-family dwelling comes in. We never see those. So that would be more of a question for your construction department.
Okay.
That being said, though, there are mechanisms that you can certainly put into place that would require either the installation of a dry well regarding certain amounts of additional impervious coverage. There are regulatory mechanisms that you can certainly put into your ordinance that would apply specifically to single-family dwellings. Chester Township in Morris County, for example, just recently worked on a new dry well ordinance where they require dry wells based on the amount of new coverage that they're putting on a site. So it's a bit of a sliding scale, but that is something that you could handle from a regulatory aspect.
So just to interject there for a second, because we have requirements that, if, I don't know what it is, over 500 square feet or 600 square feet of addition, you have to put like a Coltech chamber in now, right? So we do have some rudimentary. Is that what you're talking about?
That would be something like that, yeah. So if you already have it in there, then you already have some sort of regulatory aspect to single family dwellings.
Well, what's happening is the existing homes that aren't changing to that degree or that are building within the footprint, a clear cutting or changing the landscaping are affecting the water runoff and the erosion, I'm seeing a lot of soil erosion too. I'm getting calls like dirt is moving from one yard to the next. That wasn't, by the way, that wasn't the only question I had on the setbacks, because everyone's fighting about the generators and air conditioners and everything else. But since we're talking water, I'm going to focus on water right now. My point is that the existing homes, even if they're not under construction, if they change their outside landscaping or anything like that, we are seeing a lot of, I would say, more modern, clean landscaping, not a lot of overgrowth or large trees. Things are coming down. And it is affecting neighbors. So, in the storms, we get a lot of calls, but I also have gotten calls, I'm sure many of us have, without the storms, just saying my neighbor, it's slightly raining, my neighbor's backyard is coming into mine.
Go ahead, Jeff, you have a question, then,
First I was going to weigh in on the same thing you said, we require seepage pits with all the major constructions. So I didn't think of this until we were really just talking, but Tenafly has steep slope requirements. If you cut into it by more, if it's more than 25% grade, I think. Is that something we should revisit, because water obviously going down accelerates, and if someone wanted a terrace, would that make a difference?
It ultimately depends on how that terrace is going to be constructed. The more you disturb slopes in their natural environment, the more you are going to change how water is going to run off. There are certain instances where if you change a slope, depending on how that slope currently is and how you're designing it, you could direct water away from properties. That's why it's such a tough question to answer, because it's all so very site specific. If you're having issues with runoff on adjoining properties, especially during construction projects, then there may be issues with how those construction projects are being managed and how they're being enforced. Typically, there's going to be requirements from your construction department regarding silt fencing, cleaning up vehicles before and after they leave the site. So if you do see silt going onto adjoining properties, there may be issues with that code enforcement, or just how the builders are doing it. But regarding the steep slope ordinance, and if it's going to impact adjoining properties, it really all depends on how that slope is going to be regraded. Obviously, it's always best to maintain natural slopes when you can, but there could be instances where that slope is going to another adjoining property. By implementing a swale, especially associated with a new dwelling, you can possibly direct that water away from that neighboring property as well.
I think the steep slopes are fine as long as people are maintaining trees. It's all the trees taken out really makes it literally a waterfall.
It increases water runoff rates. If new trees are installed, you also have to hope that the property owner is going to actively maintain those trees, because depending on the species, they could take a while to grow. Green giant arborvitae, for example, grow very quickly, but they're not deer tolerant and they could die very quickly as well. So it becomes a maintenance issue ultimately.
Thank you.
Manu has a question. Have you have a question?
Yeah, so one of the, under the open space incentives, I think one of them was permit taller building heights in zoning districts, so if we're going up, which, it seems like the planning board seems to be giving exceptions from time to time to go higher. You raised the point of, increased heat and climate change and all that. This may be an esoteric question, but, does building height impact the heat in a community? And are we, so if you go from 3 to 4, are you actually making things worse from a heat and climate point of view, rather than, and can we just say no to something, is that probably an incentive?
To answer your second question, yes. If there's a variance requested, and the board does not feel like the applicant met the burden of proof to address the statutory criteria, you can always say no. Regarding the first question, building height, I would say, is less related to heat islands and more related to light, air, and open space. So the taller a building is, the greater shadow it's going to cast. The idea behind the recommendation of the 2023 reexamination report is that we've seen a lot of applications in front of the planning board where developers are trying to get, for lack of a better phrase, the best bang for their buck. They're trying to get as much building footprint there as possible. Oftentimes the board has said, we don't really like this. They come back and they have a narrow building. Sometimes they get the hint, sometimes they don't. They being the applicant. The idea behind permitting for a larger building height that was actually to provide additional opportunities for open space and potentially reduce the impacts of heat islands. So by allowing for a narrower building footprint, but maybe allowing for a building from 3 to 4 stories, reserving that additional space that would have maybe otherwise been occupied by a building footprint as open space purposes with landscaping. So while it's going to potentially impact light, air, and open spaces, might potentially create shadows. The idea was to create that additional opportunity for green space on the ground. So that way, when people are walking, they would have an open space amenity that was eye level next to them, as opposed to something that might be closed off or maybe on a rooftop or some sort of other private amenity.
If I can just follow up on that, what I'm talking about is the internal heat, like the actual heat that gets contained in a building makes the building hotter, and eventually, if there are so many of these, it has an impact on the environment.
Yeah, with older construction, potentially, but with newer construction methodologies, especially with, LEED certification strategies, building insulation, window insulation, simply painting a roof from a dark color to a white color, there are ways to combat that. So I think with new building construction and new building materials, I think there is a way to combat that internal heat aspect, where if it was an older building, for example, I live in a garden apartment, which is a very nice way to say a brick oven pizzeria. I had my air conditioning running while I was away from the office today, because I knew when I would come back, it would otherwise be about 85 degrees inside.
Yeah, but so about the saying no to something. So what happens is, you have applicants who come in and they want a certain size in a community, and maybe the community just can't allow for that. And that's why I'm saying say no instead of making an accommodation to go higher, or allow for, they should go maybe somewhere else where they could accommodate. And I'm not saying we don't want the business, but sometimes we have to look at what's good for the community as well, besides just, that's just a point.
Okay, hi. So I believe the question you were answering was one of the ones that I had submitted through Jimmy. And I want to just circle back to that question, because I think the purpose of you coming today is for us to have actionable goals, right? So if we revisit my question, you're a very fast reader, but very fast talker, was if we increase the required side yard for new constructions and improvements, I believe science supports that. Okay, if we have that increased yard, that it would not only mitigate floods, but again, now that other piece, which I don't think has gotten as much attention, is lower temperatures, right? So we tend to kind of get off on talking just about water, but there's other things that having more greenery around the house, assists in, like reducing our temperature. So the question was, should the town be planning for increasing side yard, right, and reducing the housing density? And if so, how much benefit can this result in concerning the issues mentioned above? So now, if you have a menu and you're like, okay, well, I've got French trenches, can deal with some flooding, this, but the purpose of you being here isn't for us to just do more talking, right? It's for us to be like, okay, now we, in fact, adjust the plan for how we have our town move forward, right? So if I go back to this issue about if we add more space to side yard, now, while you said it doesn't in every house address all the issues, and maybe there's other things that houses should be doing, isn't that a kind of, in a way, low-lying fruit, actionable goal? Where we say, okay, now rather than X amount of feet between the homes, we increase that amount of feet. Is that something that we should plan for as we are making a plan for future development? And
So I don't think that increasing the side yard setback requirement in and of itself will help with flooding or heat issues. The reason being is we need to be also looking at coverage as well. So you can reduce your side yard setback requirement, you can increase it by 2, 3 feet, 5 feet, but coverage would remain the same. So all you'd be getting is slightly different looking houses. So the amount of coverage on a piece of property
okay,
would be remaining the same.
and that's because you're saying they would build back.
Either build back, build forward, build narrower, or
So coverage of the house is the issue with these two topics.
building coverage, I think, would be something that would relate more directly with stormwater than with
And
just the
heat,
side yard setback.
and
heat,
heat island,
probably, and yes, yeah, I would say heat on.
building coverage. Reducing building coverage of a property is something that we should consider.
It would have more of an effect. The reason I'm being very wishy-washy, admittedly, with my language, is that is a big decision to make for your residential zones. Because if you make that decision, all of a sudden you are going to be putting potentially a lot of residential properties in a non-conforming condition. So any improvement they want to make, they want to add a garage, they want to add a little bump out in the back, you could be putting them in a position where they were going to be able to do it just through a construction permit, through having to file a zoning court application. So it is a very big decision to make. It's also
there's no correct font.
probably a good idea to really understand where the problems are in the borough when it comes to flooding and when it comes to heat islands. So about a year ago, the municipal land use law, which is this guiding document for planning and zoning in New Jersey, was updated to make a new requirement for any new land use plan of a master plan. So the borough hasn't had to do this yet because we haven't had to adopt a new land use plan. It's called the climate vulnerability assessment. In a climate vulnerability assessment, there are a number of required aspects that a municipality needs to include in it. And I'll read through those here. Municipalities are to analyze current and future threats to and vulnerabilities of the municipality associated with climate change related natural hazards. To include a build out analysis of future residential, commercial, industrial, and other development in the municipality, and an assessment of the threats and vulnerabilities identified above related to that development. Identify critical features, facilities, utilities, roadways, and other infrastructure that is necessary for evacuation purposes and sustaining quality of life during a natural disaster to be maintained at all times in an operational state. Analyze the potential impact of natural hazards on relevant components and elements of the master plan. Provide strategies and design standards that may be implemented to reduce or avoid risks associated with natural hazards. Include a specific policy statement on consistency, coordination, integration of the climate change related hazard vulnerability assessment with certain other plans adopted by the municipality, and rely on the most recent natural hazard projections and best available science provided by the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. So that's a new requirement for any new land use plan going forward, which is really, putting it more succinctly, identifying what your threats are in terms of natural hazards. That can include flooding, it can include heat, includes
Is there anything about loss of biodiversity in those things? Is that ever mentioned as a topic?
in the
Loss of vegetation per se, anything like that? I'm just curious if it's ever mentioned. Something that ever be.
I don't know if that was specifically mentioned by climate vulnerability, but could potentially well be in there. The reason that we haven't done this yet in the borough is twofold. One, we haven't been required to do it yet. But more importantly, that too, I never like to be the first one to do something. I always like, it makes me sound lazy, but what I like to do is see what other municipalities are doing and what other state agencies come out with. Take that information, build on it, and make it better. So I've been waiting for the Highlands Council. Highlands Council is a regional planning agency that has nothing to do with Tenafly. But they're coming out with a template plan for these types of climate vulnerability assessments. I'm personally waiting to see what that type of template looks like. And then taking that template and running with it with other municipalities, gearing it more towards them, obviously, but seeing what information and what data they're really looking at as well. I think once the municipality does that, and we figure out on a mapping basis tied with our land use plan, where our problem areas are, then you can come up with more efficient zoning regulations and requirements for addressing some of those hazards. So, you know, you can come up with a requirement to reduce building coverage across the board, but you might find certain areas of the borough where flooding or heat islands are more problematic than other portions of the borough. This would allow you to target those neighborhoods specifically.
All right, then Lauren has a question, then Jack, then let's keep pushing forward.
Respectfully,
Mhm.
the communities along the Palisade Mountains that are built into these cliffs and the steep hills have nothing to do with the highlands. And so we have a completely different water situation and I think environmental concerns. I do not like sitting back on my, and waiting approach. I need us to be proactive, which is exactly what this is. And I think to Julie's point, we understand our flooding, we understand our issues. We are looking to make changes and we are hoping for some concrete suggestions to our ordinances that allow us to be better proactive in terms of environmental, in terms of conservation, flooding. Right now, Tenafly, every house is getting knocked down and twice the size house is getting built. We are seeing vast amounts of flooding. We are seeing vast amounts of complaints between neighbors. What you're being asked is to give us not just suggestions, but concrete recommendations out of the ordinances and say, if you make the change to this ordinance, maybe we can conserve, preserve, be proactive. So I'm not waiting on the Highlands here. I'm not. We along this community, along the Palisade Mountains, coming right off the Hudson, coming right down these hills, it's Alpine, it's Tenafly, it's Englewood Cliffs, it's Fort Lee, it's Powell Park. All of us are dealing with enormous amounts of flood management right now, and we need some real proactive measures.
Understood. Where I will push back though is that while the Highlands is a different region of the state, they will be looking at the same type of flood information. They will be taking a look at.
We're holding this meeting. Julie's sending in questions. We're all talking because we have all made the decision that we want to move forward and change our ordinances.
Understood. And it's certainly something that we can.
Good.
No, it's certainly something that we can work on. But
Let's go to Jeff's question and then
I
continue your
I would like to
presentation.
respond to one other thing.
Yeah.
I agree, right? Borough, as well as every other municipality, needs to take immediate action. What I don't want to necessarily do is just craft these ordinances by myself. What we need is a team to work on this. I need to be consulting with your planning board engineer. I need to be consulting with your municipal engineer. I'm not the one that reviews your single family dwelling applications.
And that's fine.
But in order to make those zoning recommendations, we need to have those discussions with your engineers. We need to have that discussion with your building department. We need to have that discussion with your construction department, with your health department. It is a team effort. So I can answer general zoning questions, but regarding specifics for how do we manage stormwater on individual single family dwellings, that's a collaborative team effort that we really need a strong engineering background as well.
It's
So-
not.
Finish that thought. I just wanted to get them.
It's not just on the individual homes. What's happening is literally the flood water coming off of the plateaus on 9W and all those areas are literally coming across all of the towns in a row. When we have spoken to the state about this, when we have spoken to the federal government, they have literally said, call in the Army Corps of Engineers to us because the amount of water that is being generated and coming off of the Palisade Mountains is affecting all of these towns. So it's not just side yard setbacks, and that's individual stuff that we're going to try to, put some drainage here and there. But we need an overall storm management plan for the whole community. So
Yes.
Yeah, so, my view on this is the first thing we have to do is establish what the right questions are before we start thinking about, the answers, obviously.
Mhm.
And maybe side yards are the answer, maybe they're not. But I think, yeah, it's a very large, big picture here with a lot of different tentacles. So these questions have to be identified and then we can figure out how to solve them. But go ahead, Jeff, you're next. Then let's continue with the presentation.
Real quickly on the side yards. I believe some other towns, because I agree with you, you can't just say, okay, it's 15 feet now, let's make it 20 feet setback.
Mhm.
But some towns, I think, because the tendency of houses used to be, if I have 15 feet on each side, I'll go to 15 feet here, but I'll leave 25 feet on the other side for a wider. That was more the pattern. Now it's, can I get to 14 and a half and 14 and a half? So are there formulas that can be used that takes advantage of either averaging or something else? Some other formulas that are not strictly 15 feet on both sides? Because I think I've heard that other towns do use a slightly different approach to try and address that.
There is, and you guys actually kind of do that already. So you have for example, your R20 district.
Right.
That has a minimum side yard setback of 15 feet, but then you have a percentage of your side yard setback combined as a percentage of your lot width. So you're doing that to an extent already. You're doing that to an extent already. So it would require an adjustment to those percentages.
Okay. That was just all I want to say on side yard, because I agree. And that's one way to address it. Can I jump to proper mix?
Can I just address the density question?
You can do that because that was one of the topics that actually
What topic?
proper mix.
Yes. 'cause
That's actually one of the things that brought us originally to the discussion, and you and I have actually
Yep,
had some discussions.
exactly. And I drove past the property that we always talk about and I have a slight update with it. But to discuss density, again, it gets into a very specific site plan design question. So if you were to imagine a 10-acre piece of property, and if you were to develop that property with 8 single-family dwellings or 12 multifamily units, technically that multifamily unit consisting of 12 units is going to have a higher density than those 8 single-family dwellings. But based on the way that building is designed, it could potentially have less impervious coverage and less lot disturbance than a development with 8 single-family dwellings. Considering that each dwelling might have a footprint of 2,000 square feet, which would be kind of modest, I think, in Tenafly, constructing a cul-de-sac, constructing individual driveways. So density isn't always necessarily related to more detrimental environmental impacts. It really gets to how that site is designed. And if it's a compact design that's preserving some sort of open space element, then increased density could actually be better for the environment than less density. It all depends on how it's designed.
So the design is something that, does this town consider that? Is that an area we should look to improve, to your point? If our goal is to increase yard,
Yeah.
should we do some work on that? Is that an actionable situation?
It is. There's 2 ways to go about requiring additional open space or some sort of amenity with density, right? If we were to discuss private open space, private amenities first, so the amenities that are associated with the multifamily building. From what I've seen in our ordinance, we really don't have any requirements for that. So we've seen applications coming from the planning board where somebody builds something and there's no interior or exterior amenity space for that property, right? There's no required dog park, there's no required exercise, whatever it might be, some sort of amenity. You can build that into a development regulation, so you're capturing that for all multifamily developments that are being constructed.
Okay.
If we were to look at providing open space for public aspects, that would be some sort of give and take, essentially. So the recommendation that I had, or that the planning board had in the reexamination report, was looking at those heights, allowing for an additional height for that open space provision on a piece of property, so that way you are getting that green space ground level with your building development. So it's really 2 ways to go about it. I would recommend at least a private open space amenity path. creating some sort of ordinance that would require those types of amenity spaces with multifamily developments. That way, when we get an application in front of the planning board or zoning board, we can look to our ordinance and say, hey, you have a building footprint of 80%, whereas you're only permitted 40%. And oh, by the way, you're not providing any type of outdoor and indoor amenity space. Gives the board a little bit more oomph if they want to tell a developer to scale back a project.
That's for the multi-family.
For
stuff.
multifamily, yes. Yeah.
Nothing we could do for a single family. Possible,
Not necessarily in terms of providing like public open space, or
but yeah.
only if it was a subdivision application. If it was a subdivision application where you had a number of lots. We haven't really gotten a lot of those recently, but there have been instances where a larger property has been kind of torn down and smaller lots put into place. Yep, that could potentially be implemented there as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Mix of uses, I'm just jumping around the presentation now, so I apologize.
Yeah.
Mix of uses, we can actually hop to that slide, I guess. So this has been a big discussion in this town, at least with the planning board. Can you just go back one slide? I'm sorry. So your zoning ordinance is a little odd in the sense that it almost cascades onto itself. So your B1 district establishes as a permitted use residence located above the first floor. That is the specific language, residences above the first floor. I'm sorry, dwellings above the first floor. The B2 district, in turn, permits all those uses in the B1 district, plus some more uses. The C district permits all those uses in the B1 and the B2 district, plus more. The SRB district permits all those uses in the B1 district, the B2 district, and the C district, and more. And then finally, you have your industrial zone, your MI district, which permits all those uses in the B1, the B2, the C, and the SRB district, and even more. So it essentially cascades upon itself. So there's ambiguity the way the ordinance is written right now. So when we look at the B1 district, it simply says dwellings above the first floor. So it doesn't stipulate what is on this first floor. And it doesn't stipulate of how much of whatever that is needs to be on your first floor. So traditionally and historically, the borough has interpreted that as a mixed use requirement. So because it stands back to the B1 district, and because the B1 district is really where we are trying to encourage a walkable environment the most, that's it, your heart of your downtown, your B1 district. We've always interpreted that to be ground floor commercial, residences up above. But then we get into the ambiguity of the language because there's no regulation or no requirement for how much ground level non-residential space you require. So we have in our planning board seen a number of applications which provide essentially a smaller, a limited nominal amount of non-residential space in order for them to be classified as permitted use. So if we go to the next slide, the 2023 reexamination report notes that the borough's land use and development regulations do not presently establish any type of minimum area provisions for the required amount of ground level non-residential floor area. On the next slide, we discuss how that's problematic. This omission allows for the potential scenario, I say potential, but it's happened, which a developer, in order to qualify as a permitted use, may propose a limited or nominal amount of ground level non-residential floor area, which may be difficult to lease to businesses in the future due to its changed business size. So I think the smallest we've seen probably in front of the planning board has been 250 square feet, I think was a recent one, 500 square feet. What we do is that we were afraid that we're going to get a scenario where we are going to get a non-residential space so small that it's not going to be attractive to a business in the future. So that leads to a question, what is the right percentage? And that's an easier question to answer in certain districts, not easy to answer in other districts. And I think what the borough really needs to do is take an assessment and figure out where do you want to promote mixed use development the most? Because right now, the way your regulations are written, you're promoting mixed use development, that walkable environment where you have street, stores on the ground floor and residences up above. You're promoting that, if we go back to our zoning map, going all the way up north, up the train line. Everywhere. So.
And you're saying it's not targeted.
It's
It's all.
essentially, I look at your B1 district, your B2 district, even your C district, as concentric circles going outside of your downtown area. Where if you're in a B1 district, not to put a specific percentage on it, but Jeff, to answer your question, you want a ground floor non-residential percentage of at least 80%, I would say. You're allowing for additional space for residential lobby, for mail rooms, things like that. Maybe the borough considers a slightly reduced one if they're somehow able to get covered parking on the ground floor. Doesn't really happen a lot in our downtown because those lots are so small. But in your downtown environment, your B1 district, your B2 district, I would even say your C district, you want to really encourage that mixed use walking environment because I think it's viable there and I think it makes sense. When you go up to the SRB district, or even to the MI district, for example, when you get away from that core, it becomes a tougher question because what we don't want to do is create a scenario where somebody creates 2,000 square feet of non-residential space and it just sits vacant for years and years and years. And the nightmare scenario we always bring up, and not to make fun of them too much, but there's River Commons apartment, which is located on Newbridge Road in Teaneck. You drive by that, it's a beautiful looking building.
Okay.
You drive by that at nighttime,
right?
it's all dark on the ground floor. Now, I was going to say it's been entirely vacant. I drove past today. Teaneck Liquors is moving in, so you get one space now out of all that floor area that's unoccupied. That's the scenario that we have to try to avoid. So my recommendation would be for the borough to really consider where you want that mixed use environment. I would think you want that in your B1 district, your B2 district, your C district. When it comes to your SRB district, it might make sense just to eliminate that requirement for ground floor non-residential. If a developer comes in and they want to have that aspect, all power to them. We have seen some redevelopment where people have been building or rehabbing buildings with new exciting non-residential uses. We have a new paddleboard facility coming in.
Pickleball.
What did I say? Paddleboard?
Paddleball.
Sorry, pickleball.
There's also paddle.
There is a paddle involved. In
Water.
in fact, one would argue there's more paddles and pickles involved. Thank you.
So I have a question, because from what and maybe I'm not hearing this right, you're looking to have more residential in our downtown business district and throughout, and not require business on the first floor. Is that what I'm-
No. The question is, what's the appropriate amount of non-residential floor area to have in a mixed-use development? In your core area of your downtown, where I think you really want to try to concentrate that type of mixed-use walkable environment, I think it makes sense to have that type of percentage set there. Spitballing, I would say maybe 80%. I think that would allow for
80% business on the first floor.
on the first floor, yes. What you don't want in your B1 district is, I'm sorry to interrupt, is ground floor residential. That's the scenario. you
Completely
definitely
agree.
want, yes.
My question is on density, which is going back to our earlier discussion.
Mhm.
I am not sure Tenafly downtown should even have that type of density.
Mhm.
Currently, we have 2 floors above many of our businesses of apartments. I'm not sure how many are filled. I'm not sure how many are needed. I understand some of our local shop owners and workers live above their own stores and so forth. Have you given any thought to the density of our community and our resources
Well,
in making this recommendation? I'm saying, because I don't actually think any of it should be mixed use, maybe, in anything larger than as is.
well, we wouldn't be, the recommendation for this split isn't changing your downtown density at all. It's just simply requiring that on a ground floor level, you have to have 80% non-residential. We're not recommending
Why
any,
not 100%?
because if you do have residential up above, so say if you have a story above residential, you do need some sort of lobby space, you do need some sort of package delivery space. All that happens in the ground floor. So realistically, 80% is a better or more realistic number than 100%, because if you have 100%, you do have an apartment up above, you can't have a residential lobby in the ground floor. So it's more semantic. But we're not making any recommendation to have a higher density. In fact, you're except for some of your multifamily zones, none of those districts there, the B1, B2, C, MI, or SRB, there's no density limitations. Essentially, what controls the number of units, the amount of intensity in those lots is your building coverage, in certain instances, floor area ratio, and parking.
every building that is coming in to request a mixed use right now is asking for an additional floor. So everything that's 3 floors now is now going to 4. Every single variance has been, in the past 2 years, has been accepted and
No,
approved.
that's not happening.
Not,
No,
Wells Fargo, Benjamin Brothers, they were all stuff on railroad, it's all been denied.
Benjamin Brothers
I'm
was
talking
originally,
about the T of downtown.
Okay,
I'm talking about the T
just
of
to be
downtown.
clear.
Tell me what in the T of downtown.
so yeah, there was 3 applications and all 3 were approved.
So again, my question is, as the new mixed-use buildings are coming in, how do we as a community limit or create the correct balance, I should say, between all these requests for additional height, because everyone wants to make the additional money on the building, or else they say, oh, well, we're gonna walk away and we're not gonna renovate your town. So how do we politely refuse every request to go higher and higher with it, without deterring building and renovation? And this is,
that's a, yeah,
It's hard to have it both ways.
yes, that's yeah.
Capitalism at its best.
It's a,
the most, beautiful corner building, 2-story residential, 1-story business,
Yeah, that works for them.
brand new. It should work for us too. And again, Tenafly seems to be giving it away in terms of height, air, space, shadow. What is your recommendation?
I'm sorry, so the question is essentially how to say no to developers that want those. additional
Those
floors?
additional variances to go high.
Essentially just to deny the application.
Can we make a density thing in our plan? Can we make a density? At some point, this town cannot take on another 2,000 people. I mean, we realistically are going up. We went up in the census, by about 1,000 residents. And, went from 14 to 15 something.
Almost from 14.5 to 15.5.
Yes.
Over 10 years.
Yes. So my question is, we can't keep on this trajectory and maintain our resources.
That's one of the.
Sure. So is there something that actually we could put in a master plan about density?
Yes, absolutely. So, it would be more of a development regulation regarding density.
That's
Municipalities
possible?
can certainly implement density requirements. The art is figuring out what is the proper density. So obviously, it need to look at it in a zone by zone district.
And you guys would do that?
We can, if we were to instruct about the borough to do that, yes. Yeah. But we'd have to look at. We'd have to look at existing levels of development. We would have to look at existing lot sizes, because what you might have is a situation where you have densities that are going to look higher in, say, your downtown area. Reason being is your downtown lots may only have a size of 2,000, 3,000 square feet. So the minute you add an apartment or two in one of those, you're exceeding a very high density as opposed to what you would typically see in, say, a larger lot where you might have an acre or two to work with. So it is a bit of a sliding scale with terms of density. So the numbers can be kind of scary looking, but when you practice and look at what those densities can generate on a lot by lot basis, sometimes it doesn't add to much.
Well, some of the applications ask for 80 units, 120 units
Yeah,
along
but
these districts.
downtown, the 3 buildings we're talking about,
I said along these districts.
right, but the 3 buildings we're talking about downtown on Railroad Avenue, that extra floor added about 8 apartments. So
And again, as Julie said, light, shadow,
Well, they were there
airspace, everything. So, and
Well, if you're going to have that higher type of density, your downtown environment is where you want that, because you're not going to be focusing that shadow on, say, single family neighborhood. It's along West Clinton. The West Railroad Avenue, for example, the movie theater, that was approved with 18 total units. So its density is going to look very high. But at the end of the day, 18 units on that piece of property, it's going to be a higher density than what you see in a single family zoning district, obviously, but it wasn't that much of an increase from what was there originally in terms of units.
0 to 18.
Well, I'm sorry, in terms of some of the other developments there, I apologize.
And along these districts, let's say closer to the border of Cresskill. I mean, do you recommend high density around the housing over there?
Yeah, well, actually, it depends on what your definition of high density is. So if we're looking at 15 to 20 units per acre or 35 to 40 units per acre, You know, I think once you have larger lot sizes there, your density will go down, but your number of units will still be increased, so.
And in terms of density, have you, in your planning, do you consider the traffic flow and the community resources in terms of density, how much density we should be properly having?
Yes. So, oftentimes we look at redevelopment plans or specific zoning, regulations or requirements. There could be a traffic study that accompanies that as well to understand what the implication of that density increase or density decrease would be.
You
We do
consider-
not do that ourselves now. You would have to hire a engineering firm that specifically does traffic studies.
You consider schools and first response?
Schools is a tricky subject because you're really not supposed to.
And as we know, the planning board can never take that. into consideration.
Yes,
Nothing, I'm talking, this
I'm
is
just
our
saying,
outside.
yes.
measure.
But
So-
so everyone
This is our
understands,
outside
when
measure.
people go for variances, they go to planning boards.
Right now, he's consulting with us.
Right.
So what is the answer on that? Do you don't?
for a plan, if there's a planning board application, no, we would not, we could look at what the school numbers typically could be or generation. But a board cannot approve or deny an application based on school children. What you want to, and the reason I'm dancing around this is you really want to tread carefully, because what you don't want to do is decrease certain areas of development potential to discourage potential new residents and be accused of exclusionary
Right.
zoning. So that is the delicate dance.
What about Lauren's question about the first responders thing, though? Does that ever come into your calculation?
Not with us specifically, no. You see more first responders, and emergency service reviews happen during the site plan process.
Gotcha.
So making sure the building's accessible, where fire is going to be coming from. The municipalities can't prepare community facilities elements that do look at emergency services, what their needs might be. I don't know when the last one was done in Tenafly.
We have the brook that runs under our downtown. It actually runs under railroad. In any of this flooding and watershed and everything, do you think it's a mistake for Tenafly to continue to develop on top of that?
Interesting thing before you answer that question, but we've literally learned in the past 24 hours, that brook was moved sometime in the 1920s or 1930s. It used to run down West Railroad Avenue. And the council at the time, 100 years ago, decided to move it under the buildings. And that there was actually a bridge on West Clinton at the end of Railroad, and a bridge, I think on either Washington or River Edge, where the stream, where there was a stream and a culvert there that was open.
Is that why our road's going through?
Not sure, but just because the topic is here, and the DEP is now involved in the conversation about whether that stream should be moved back to underneath the road. This is like literally between today and yesterday.
Well, as it stands.
So interesting stuff developing.
As it stands now, it happens to be under some of the proposals.
Yes, we're about to wrap
And
up.
the, anticipated changes of the downtown.
Gets more into a structural question. So if buildings could be designed to accommodate that, then it gets down to more, can a building or a site be engineered to incorporate that, to respect that boundary? If the answer is yes, then require developers to do the proper building and construction and structural analysis to accommodate it.
And no part of like our flooding or watershed management plan should consider creating a blue zone there.
In that specific spot,
Well,
if,
I mean, just to protect, this is our
Yes.
bringing water to the Ordell Reservoir.
again, this is a question that you'd really want to gear more towards an engineer than a planner. Because it's not so much zoning related as it is water management related and engineering related. So I would say that for an engineer, in terms of, creating a blue zone in that area. It is existing impervious coverage in that area. It's already developed. So I would imagine there's some NJDEP regulations that would allow for redevelopment of those lots because they are already in coverage. That being said, NJDEP just came out with new flood hazard elevations that are increasing everything by 2 feet. So that could be a major impediment to development in that corridor as well. I think we're still waiting to see how that all shakes out.
And those regulations, they'll get reviewed by whatever becomes before the planning board.
The new flood hazard elevation regulations, they do. Unless it depends on when an application was filed. So any new application that gets filed, say tomorrow, they're going to have to abide by those new regulations. If the application was filed prior to the adoption of those regulations, they are allowed to adhere to the old rules.
So what's the next steps to wrap this up for tonight? You come back to us with questions. How do you want to approach this?
It seems like,
You've
Seems
heard
like
the
there's a
comments from
couple-
council.
a couple items. One, there seemed like there was some interest in that climate vulnerability assessment. That's something that the borough wants to undertake. That would be a planning board endeavor. That's something that we could begin. Obviously, we would need authorization from the borough and from the planning board to do that. The second thing I would recommend is coming up with some sort of subcommittee task force, working potentially with myself, your planning board engineer, zoning board engineer, municipal engineer, and probably your building and construction department as well. Look at how we're regulating flooding and stormwater on certain sites, specifically residential properties, what the troubleshooting aspects are, where the holes in the ordinance are, and coming up with a game plan to address those.
Okay, so how about this? What, perhaps if you can put together a letter to the council addressed to the borough, addressing those issues as suggestions. Okay, and any others you think based upon questions from the council this evening and their comments. And then send that to us, and then we'll, at the next meeting, everyone will have time to have digested that, and then move on to the next stage in this process.
I just
And the
want,
whole thing with the subcommittee with David makes a lot of, committee makes a lot of sense.
I agree. I just wanted to be clear, the climate vulnerability assessment, though, you did read that one of the factors is, of course, the idea of heat island or temperature, right? It's not, I've been in so many conversations where they just get hijacked talking about water and only flooding, as if it's the only thing that is the problem.
No, yeah, I agree. So usually flooding is always kind of a hot topic.
Yeah.
So you're 100% right. There are numerous other issues that accompany climate vulnerability and climate change. How many people stomped out a spotted lanternfly recently?
Right.
And by the way, the trick is to attract it from the front so they
Front,
can't.
yeah.
Yep.
Not the back.
Yep. Everybody else on that. So
The climate vulnerability assessment,
it has a lot of things. It has a lot of different things to look at. Essentially, vulnerable populations, for example, is one of the things that you would have to look at in a climate vulnerability assessment. Vulnerable populations have multiple definitions. People are census blocks with reduced incomes, over 60%, I think, minority, other aspects as well. So there, if you're interested, the NJDEP has a toolkit online. What I was just simply do is Google climate vulnerability NJDEP toolkit. It'll be the first thing that pops up. You can see some of the things that they look at in that website.
Okay, you good?
So write a memo to council regarding that and recommendation regarding a subcommittee.
And right, any other thoughts you have based on the council's comments here this evening?
Okay.
Send it in and we'll get you on the next bill.
thank you, Mr. Novak.
Thank you, David. Appreciate your time. Okay, next, to be considered the senior center library for improvements.
Yeah, Mayor, this topic was brought up at a prior meeting, from a memo previously sent from Andy Hipwood. So it's really up for the council to decide if they want to move forward, to retain them to move forward and for them to provide and write up preliminary cost estimates, if they want to revise or pursue any of these options.
Council comments, questions?
We definitely would like to pursue the construction of a standalone community center. If it's cost effective, if not, I'm absolutely open to combining it with any and all ideas, including three things in one building.
Other comments?
So I think the discussion is, do we want to spend $15,000 on a report that we already know the answer to?
Yeah, well, before,
So,
right.
I'm all for buying these things. I don't think we need to spend $15,000.
Right, it's basically as the most succinct thing Andy said is pick the size of the building you want, multiply it by $500 a square foot, and you're ready to go.
Correct.
Right. So I'm not hearing any support for spending $15,000 at this point for this,
Well, what we should do is,
It's picking up.
what we spoke about last time is, so what is the timeline of taking action on this? So budget starts, November, right? We should.
Yep,
No, I
I
think,
think that's. Yeah, what we want to do.
go ahead, Vinod.
I think the question was, a couple of questions, right? One, what do we want? We're still kind of fumbling around with that. I think we were supposed to have a dedicated discussion, I think, was what it was, and not have it put in on the council meeting for tonight, but have a separate a meeting to discuss what we want, how big we want it, do we want, where do we want it? And, we're still not we don't have an answer to any of those. And I think until we get an answer to those, we can't, talk about construction.
I think there's an interest from each one of these groups that they want a new senior center, want a new library or rebuilt library. There's an interest from the community for a community center. I think we say we want a building, pick how big we want it, and then decide what goes in it next. We need a site, we need a cohesive agreement on spending, we need a financial plan, we need to see what grants.
So we really need in order to do any work on this seriously, we need a dedicated committee. A couple of people to get together and start talking about it. That's the only way it's gonna lead things will move forward or intentionally die or being, not the right time.
I would like to task the planning, well, I mean, it's not the planning board who can identify the property. So we need an identification of possible locations. To see how much would that location cost, how much would this location cost, purchase price of property, costs and size dimensions of each property potential. What can go there, what kind of traffic is there, what kind of walkability is there?
So, Lino, you want to be on this committee?
I'd be happy to be on it, but I think one of the things that we keep asking Andy to do is come back to us with what or are the potential, the sites, how much, we can fit on it, and I don't think we get those answers. So, I'm happy to be on.
Okay. Anyone else volunteering for it?
So before that,
Go ahead, Dan.
to Adam's point, budget season's coming up. It's $500 per square foot. You'd have to pick a number first to see what we can afford. Why would we go, oh, we want a 3-story community center / library / thing and be like, oh, price tag's 500, back to the drawing board? Why would we do that?
Because I don't think sitting in this room, 7 or 8 people.
No, you would pick,
Right.
you would know a realistic number based on our budget, 3.5 mil in the capital. So we'll call it 1.2 that we can afford per year.
Right. So this is
Pick
way
one.
outside of our capital budget. This is above and beyond our capital budget.
It's going to explode the capital
Right.
budget.
If you want to keep this within the capital budget, we're not building anything. The money isn't there.
This has to be a bond or some
Okay,
additional
so
financial.
This is my point. Before we start figuring out how we're paying for something, we don't have any idea what
We should have a number in mind, though.
So that's why we need to get 3 council people in a room to start hashing away at some details to come up with an idea that can either get accepted or rejected. And then we can start hiring, whether it's one meeting, an hour later, whatever, then you can bring a professional in to say, you need X amount of acres, you need a total budget of this amount of money, and then you can go to the next step.
And then we'll be back here saying no to a $7 million plan. I'm predicting the future.
Right, no, I understand.
These 3 council people are going to be super enthusiastic
Right.
because we will be, no matter who we are on that board.
Well,
Yeah, we're going to want the bells and
10,000
whistles.
A 10,000 square foot building is gonna cost $5 million. Regardless of the size of the
And then
piece
we'll
of
be
land.
back here with the same document. All right, let's be more realistic. Let's cut that number down. So let's pick a number. We got to aim. We can't just dream constantly. We got to start somewhere.
Right, so
We need guidelines.
Jeff, what do you look, you have something to say?
No, I'm
Yeah.
listening to Councilmember Park and look, I think we know that there is nobody at this table that probably has the stomach at this moment to say, sure, let's spend 50 million.
Yeah, that's not gonna happen.
That's not gonna happen. Maybe there are, I'm looking around, but
I
I
mean,
don't think. And even 25 million is probably pushing. So I think we can already begin to be realistic in shrinking the number, so. You know, when you go shopping for, I know we're different, we're a municipality, but if I go shopping for a car, I can sit there and go, yeah, there's a $250,000 car. I'm not going into that showroom.
Correct.
I'm not
You
buying.
know roughly your budget going into.
You know your
You're not
budget.
going into the Ferrari dealership.
Right. So I think we need to really start with,
What's our budget?
what's our budget generally? It doesn't have to be exact, but what's the maximum we're willing to spend? And then what do we get for that? And if what we get for that is what we want, great. If it's not what we want, then maybe we're barking up the wrong tree.
I forget this fast again. I think. You're never gonna know all the right answers.
Right.
But. I think you really know 80% of, I believe we know 80% of what we're looking for, in the sense of. We have a budget, we should work with Susan and her professionals to get an understanding of how you could afford, how much you can afford, right? Just you look at your own bank account, you look at your spouse, and this is how much we can afford for that car. Susan should be able to tell us that, how we could afford that. And then, again, maybe I'm just trying to drive to answers. We've had this discussion 473 times already.
Mhm.
Someone will call me, you know, whatever. We know where the senior center is. 100% of the seniors want it roughly where they are. There is a vacant lot for all intents and purposes across the street from the senior center. Done. Next, library.
Before you move on to the senior center, can I interject something, or do you want to finish?
Give me one more second.
Okay.
Next, the library. The library is not going to be on 9W or at Benjamin Brothers. It's in our municipal complex. We've spoken about it offline or online. You could do one of two things. You could shut down the library for the next 10 years and rebuild it on the spot, or someone smarter than me said, or you do it across the street in the municipal complex, and on Friday you close down the library and Monday morning you open it up across the street. Am I giving you 100% of the answer? No, I have no clue what the answer is, but we roughly know what we want to do. Now you say, how much money can we spend on a senior center and a library? How will you get other people to fund it? There's that. The only one that I think is, it's an opinion. Community center. That is a robust, you need to find a spot for it. It'd be $100 billion for a community center. That's a hard point. I can even tell you that is. But from a library and senior center perspective, we know what an answer can be, and we, you know, can mom tell us, Susan,
What's our allowance?
that we can afford it.
What's our allowance?
You know, and have fun. To me, I think you could answer 2/3 of it. We've had this discussion many times. I'm not saying that you answer now, I'm just telling you 2/3, I think you're 80% of them.
Can I just,
So go ahead, then I'm gonna
Just say-
follow up with my senior center thought.
and again, and I know this isn't a open conversation right now to have this conversation, but again, whether we use private or public land, I think makes a huge financial difference. And I do think we need to understand what's available, what's possible to purchase, what's possible to reinvent or reestablish already within our municipality and our public property. So I would like the committee, whoever it is, to give us an option of location, site, purchase, etc.
So this is really a topic for a closed session.
Correct.
But just a general, we've been approached very recently. It's been a busy weekend. It's only Tuesday. Someone who's interested in doing some office space downtown, not residential. And having conversations about land and property, and in return for that, we get a senior center. So more details later on this evening.
Interesting.
But for now, so we have two people who are interested in this committee. Is there a third? For Lauren and Vanilla. What are you pointing to? I can't see which way you're
Oh,
pointing.
I'm rubbing my eye.
No, I was talking to you again.
No.
All right, the other four, I'll volunteer to be on, three of us, and we'll get together, okay? I'll communicate with both of you tomorrow morning. Okay, thank you. Next is the administrator's report. What do you need to tell us about?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Outside of the items I listed in my report, the Froggy Park spinner, will be getting a concrete date for install, next week, but it should be before, it should be by the end of this month, it will be installed. At the request of Kathy McClure for the plaque, honoring, Bill McClure, she had requested, again, at her request for her family and timing, to the mayor and council, if they would be willing to do the unveiling at the same day as the reorg meeting in 2024 in January. Again, that is her and her family's request, just timing with, childcare, so on and so forth. That is a day that her family would be able to come out if that is acceptable to the mayor and council.
I defer to her whenever she wants.
That's fine. Sounds like council's agreement for that.
Okay. There is a update status for the audio equipment for the chambers. I'll defer to Omar for this.
So I recently received communication from BIS Digital, who's doing the installation for the upgrades in council chambers, and they're planning on coming. Well, it's not planning, but it's a concrete date that they're coming in to do the installation on Thursday, October 19th, and Friday, October 20th. So they'll be in here those 2 days installing the equipment needed to, provide a better experience using Zoom through the council, from the council meeting.
At the end of that, what will we actually see different?
Well, hopefully, well, not hopefully, we'll have better audio, better video from the user experience. And then also we'll have greater use for this TV over here. We'll have access to be able to see, what's on the screen in the back here. And upgrades also to the cameras.
Wonderful. Thank you, Omar.
Sure.
And then last item, Mayor, if it's okay, there is the resolution on for later tonight to award the work for the Elizabeth Cady train station for the roof upgrades through a grant through the county. There is a recommendation from the CFO and some guidance needed. So I'm gonna defer if it's okay to Susan to be able to assist with that conversation.
You want to do that now? Or when we talk about the
Whatever you'd
resolution?
like.
Susan, I only will do that. Can we do it with the resolutions? Because the public's been waiting to speak.
Sure.
Is that okay? All right,
That was it.
that was it?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you,
Unless there are
Susan.
any questions. Thank you.
Any questions for Jimmy?
Can I just make a comment? I
Sure.
was just in the National Portrait Gallery. Elizabeth Cady Stanton has a portrait in the National Portrait Gallery. Nobody knew that. I haven't seen that.
No.
Yes.
Okay, it's public comment time. Audience members and thank you for your patience, everyone who'd like to speak. Audience members wishing to speak will have a 3-minute time limit to address the governing body on any items on the agenda. Large groups are asked to have a spokesperson represent them. So who would like, please come up, whoever would like to. You had your hand up first. Come right up here. Yes, you have to, if you could please come up to the microphone and give us your name and your address, and then we're all ears.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Ella Bartov. I live at 159 Hickory Avenue in Tenafly. I would like to address to the council meeting the safety issue, especially in schools. School shooting is a pandemic in America. The horrific events of school shooting increase every year. Children and teachers are being murdered, and it happens every week now. Schools must be a safe zone. All the experts, I know there were like experts recommendations previously during the last year, and they all recommend placing an SRO and protected windows, at least at the first floor of every school. The town school safety expert recommended this, the chief of police recommended this, and New Jersey Task Force Committee as well. We asked the city council members to implement the security experts' recommendations by approving the post of SROs in every school in town. I know recently it was approved not just in high school, but also in middle school. Right now, we are standing at all 4 elementary schools are still very exposed. We ask you not to play roulette with our kids' lives and just listen to the recommendations and help us with all the salaries for the SROs. Thank you.
Just, thank you. Yeah, yes, come on up. I'm just going to make a comment that this topic happens to be a discussion item for our closed session this evening, just so you're aware of that.
Good evening. My name is Adi Sodri. I live in 2 North Bray Court. I don't know if you remember, but I've been here, I think it was a year ago, speaking about school safety, and you told me, go to the Board of Education. So I did. And I've been there for almost a year in every meeting until they voted in proof of implementing SRO in our schools. Just want to ask you if you read the expert report that have been in Tenafly from the prosecutor's office. They issued a report of the situation in our schools and made recommendation. Hundreds of children, youth, staff, and teachers were murdered as a result of school shooting in America. Statistically, every week there is a school shooting. In 2015, a task force committee in New Jersey made a report with recommendation how to make school a safe zone. According to the recommendation, there must be a perimeter security layer, and to begin with, they recommended to implement an armed guard in each school. Many towns in Bergen County had implemented those guards, and by doing that action, they increased the safety of their children in their school. Cresskill, Demarest, Allendale, Bergenfield, Bogota, Cliffside Park, East Rutherford, Emerson, Fairlawn, Fort Lee, Garfield, Hackensack, Hillside, Leonia, Montvale, Old Tappan, Palisade Park, Paramos, Ridgefield Park, Sattlebrook, Wallington, Westwood, Woodridge, and many, many other towns. But Tenafly did nothing. Now, security experts from the prosecutor's office made a threat assessment in Tenafly High School and Middle School, and they made it very clear. They recommended to implement SRO in our schools. This should have been done long ago. Our children cannot be protected by luck and luck only. I hope that you know how many guns registered only in Tenafly. Thousands. This combination between so unreachable guns and teenagers, we see the results in all America. We all know it can happen anywhere, anytime. We expect you to make sure we open this year with an SRO in our school. There is no time to wait. While in Tenafly, there are continuous discussion for years. Those towns around us understood the safety recommendations, and now they opened this year with an SRO in their schools. And the fact that only Tenafly stays without it made it the easiest target. We want all of you to know that we see you personally responsible for our children's safety. We expect you to follow their recommendation of all the experts, the state, the chief of police, the school safety specialist, the superintendent, and the Board of Education, and immediately station an SRO in our schools. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, next person to speak.
My name is Linda Trembicki. I am an owner resident at 29 Knoll Road, along with my husband, Brandy Buca. I've lived here for about 25 years. I was present at the committee, I guess a meeting or two ago, regarding solar power and the cutting of trees. Specifically, I was trying to implement solar power in our house and unfortunately was denied the ability to cut 3 trees. When I looked at the allowable, acceptable uses of when one could cut a tree, it seems that we don't consider solar power at all. So since my trees were considered healthy and not, damaged in any way, et cetera, that was denied. So I brought it to this council because it just doesn't seem to make sense to me that in our world that we would not want to, allow solar and encourage solar, given that our federal government's encouraging it, our state is encouraging it. And it seems we're a little bit behind the 8 ball when it comes to considering this as an allowable use. So at that time, I was told it would be moved to a committee and, be addressed. And I'm here tonight just to see, where that's going or see, what's happening with it with the hopeful, positive response that we can, move forward on the solar.
So where we are is we're in the reality of figuring out what the data is and what the situation should be. So the environmental committee, and Julie, you correct me because Julie is the liaison to the environmental commission along with Dan with the green team. And they're kind of gathering their data to figure out, well, what's the balance between, between solar energy versus, trees and reducing carbon footprint and what all that means. Because it's kind of a question no one's ever asked us to compare the two sources of energy and things of that nature. So the environmental commission is working through that process to understand it. Our borough attorney at the same time, consistent with that, is kind of looking at some different statutes for ordinances from around the state that have kind of started to deal with this, and also looking at it from the perspective of would we, edit our construction codes or a tree code or something like that to allow for solar based upon, the reports that we're going to wind up getting from the environmental commission. So we're kind of running concurrently with that.
Okay.
Okay.
And once again, I talked to a number of solar companies. Now, once again, I only know about this with respect to my own property.
Of course.
If there's any data that you need from it, or if I can help in it, by all means, I'm
So
happy to
maybe
provide anything.
I'll provide contact information to introduce you to.
No,
Sure.
absolutely.
Thank you. And I
course.
know that the person in our commission who is doing the calculations, she was saying as the efficiency goes up for solar panels, it also changes the calculations as well, so a little bit of moving parts, but yeah, for sure. I'll reach out.
Absolutely, because at least in my particular case, I've had 5 solar companies. First, I didn't believe the first one. I thought, oh, you just wanted me to cut a tree, you want to earn some money. But after 5 of them told me these same 3 trees need to be cut. or it's not
3.
worth it, I realized that in fact, they all were honest about it, and I would like to move forward on it. So.
Lauren, you have a question?
So my neighbor catty corner to me, our backyards actually face each other. They have huge 100-year-old trees covering their entire backyard. And over the summer, they installed an entire back roof of solar panels under these trees.
Right.
And I thought of your case and I went out and spoke to them and they said, it turns out it's working beautifully. That a lot of the companies just want to make sure that there's no interference because they don't want anything, but they have had no issues. It is at full generating power or whatever it is. They're completely under a tree canopy of 100-year-old trees. You can come see it. It's off an angle.
I'd be very curious because like I said, I can see because frankly, as you can tell, I mean, I'm here twice because I really do want to do this. And I think it makes sense, especially with, everything else that's out there. But I followed the sun, and at least given our type of trees that are out there, unless I can top them, which I know is also not allowable, or at least from what I was told, the fact is it really does not give us good sun. So maybe it's just the way the exposure is at that point.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I guess the way the houses are positioned,
Our houses-
everything is
I mean,
right.
you're this way, they're that way. So,
Exactly.
but I will say they are under a shade canopy.
Yeah.
And they have, I asked them directly, I said, well, they said they cut a couple major branches, kept the majority of the trees because they actually wanted to keep.
No,
you
I
know,
would too, if
yeah,
I could. But
and,
it's,
I actually said to them, there's a person I should put you in touch with. So maybe, after I can get you guys in touch if I can get their permission and you can ask them how they did it. But they went ahead and, not that you have to do this, but they went ahead and did it anyway without cutting the trees. And they're actually finding it's generating the power that they needed.
Well, I'm happy for them.
I
I'm a
know.
little reluctant to spend, because it's quite a bit of money.
Of course it is. I'm not
without
saying,
knowing it's going to produce something, because then I've just wasted quite a bit of money on it.
of course.
So kudos to them that they had the nerve to do it. I think I'm a little bit more conservative than that because, I want to go forward and know it's actually going to work, because they actually will, if you will, promise contractually you'll get a certain amount of coverage, and if you can't get it, nobody will give you any,
Right.
any usability of it. So.
Okay. More information to come. We'll keep
Absolutely.
communicating about it. Okay, I'll put you two together, okay?
Yeah.
Okay,
And my last name is O'Connor. too.
Thank you very much.
thank you, Linda. Who else would like to make a public comment? Please come up. Hi.
Hi, I'm Sally Rubeck, 22 Esmond Place. My question is on the status of the library roof. I know when I was here in
Mhm.
August, it was going to be started on in
Okay.
September.
Go ahead, Jimmy, our administrator is going to answer those questions for you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so the contract for the award for the construction was done at the last council meeting. So now we'll have a pre-construction meeting set up in the next week or so, hopefully. And then from there, we'll be able to determine the date. So right now, we have to do a little bit of the legal paperwork that needed to be on file, insurance, bonds, making sure the contract is signed off on, and then, of course, also which will then lead to the pre-construction meeting, which will then give us a mobilization date based on delivery of some materials so they could begin.
Because it was said that they were going to start in September and it would take them 60 days.
Mm.
to engineer this.
Yeah, so I'll know a better date. I don't want to speculate just because we even have the we needed to have a second pre-construction meeting, which will take place hopefully in the next week or so. And then from there, we'll be able to get some concrete dates, but it does allow, we have to give them an opportunity to
Has the award
mobilize.
been- So the contract's been awarded?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so we're in August.
Yeah.
Okay.
And just the whole pre-construct, we had the first pre-construction meeting, and the purpose of those meetings is to figure out whether everyone's on the same page. And so we have a second pre-construction meeting once now everyone becomes on the same page. That's how the process works along. And as Jimmy said, the contractor has to have his bonds in place. And so we're in execution mode. The only detail, which is the one you want most, is the date we're going to start. We can't, right? That's what you want to know at the end of the day. What the day we're going to finish. So we can't give you that date tonight, but it's coming very rapid. And by the middle of next week, once we have the next pre-construction meeting, we'll know the date when they're starting.
And I'll make sure to communicate, of course, and I'll make sure to communicate that to
So
Julie.
we're at the finish line.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that'll get communicated to Julie. Everyone will be aware as pretty much as soon as I'm aware, no surprises, that no one will be kept in the dark, any of that information.
Okay.
You're all.
Thank you.
Actually, just one more from a library perspective. Thanks to Omar. You guys see the Community Center Digital Connect Capital Projects, the grant opportunity? It's for New Jersey State Libraries. It's coming due, the deadline September 11th. It's maximum $3 million awards out of all the grants I was reviewing over the weekend. This one seemed interesting. I don't see any mention of, it has to be lower income or pretty much just, hey, you want some money. If someone from the library team or Jimmy's team, just take a look. Maybe it's nothing, but that was the most attractive of all.
So why don't you talk to
Absolutely.
But we
Julie
just have to do
Morello
it before
tomorrow?
September 11th.
We'll talk to Julie Morello tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay, thank
I'm a
you.
guy that knows the guy. I like reading grant reports.
All right, any other public comments from the audience here? No? Okay, Omar, is there anyone out there on Zoom?
I see no hands, Mayor.
Okay, so we're gonna close public comment, move to the consent agenda. Do you want to, Susan, you want to come up and join us, please? Lauren, did you have a question?
I want to pull something from the consent agenda.
What do you want to pull for a separate vote?
Yes, please. R 23-327. Hi.
Okay.
3-3127.
Hold on a second. Vanu?
Yeah, I don't want to pull anything. I just want to talk about a couple of the resolution comments.
Okay, so perhaps let Susan go first so that as much as she wants to stand there and listen to us, I'm sure she'd rather sit down. So go ahead.
Mayor, just one last piece. This is with the one
Yeah.
that Susan is speaking on is resolution 344.
This is about the Tenafly train station roof repair.
Yes.
Okay,
Correct.
so just give us name and for the
Okay,
record.
Susan Corrado, CFO, Borough of Tenafly.
Nice to meet you.
Anyway. The reason I'm up here is I need some guidance as to where we're gonna take the funds for me to certify this.
the resolution is to award Frank Cyrus Inc. the contract to do the roof at the Tenafly train station. We could take the funds either from municipal open space or from an escrow that we have on deposit, which the tenant of the train station had put up specifically for the purpose of repairs or improvements to the train station.
Yeah, I think.
Correct.
B.
Does anyone have any further questions for Susan on this topic?
Money was intended for the.
For the
maintenance and
intended for the
repair of
specific
station.
purpose.
So let's
Yes.
use it for a specific purpose. And
Right.
then if something else happens, you'll let us
Any
know.
other questions, Susan?
No.
As a side note, there'll be a little bit remaining, so anything in the future too, there'll be roughly 6,000-7,000 or so remaining to continue doing any efforts that are needed.
My only question, there's no risk of losing any grant money from any direction.
Well, Jimmy said he did get the approval from the Bergen, the county of Bergen to utilize. We had said that we're going to use it either municipal open space or both, actually, municipal open space and the monies associated
Okay.
with the lease agreement.
So there's no loss of grants. Okay, great.
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right, thank
This
you
is
very much.
matching, right? This is a
So
matching
Jimmy,
one.
can I follow up on something? Sure. I would like better code enforcement in and around Angelique. I'm seeing enormous amounts of people just like there's lit cigarettes near there. I know we have an ordinance about no smoking in our public eating, outdoor eating areas. And I think it's in violation every day of every minute I'm in Tenafly. Along the benches in Tenafly are littered with cigarettes, but especially around Angelique, lit cigarettes. And as we know, we can't afford that building to go on fire. Please ask code enforcement. I mean, there's signs around town and there's literally on the side of Angelique and everyone just smokes next to them.
All right, so Vanu, you had questions about resolutions?
Yeah, so it's not questions, it's more just I wanted to highlight, in light of what we were talking about, the first topic of the evening. Talking about the trees that are getting pulled down and then replaced with minor trees. So for example, I'm gonna give 4 examples. 326. You have 15 major trees that we've collected money for. And that's being replaced by 9 minor trees, and they're forfeiting 12 major trees. So basically they get to take, I think it's 3 minor trees for every major tree, and that's kind of a replacement. A lot of times these are, as we talked about, they're arborvitaes, and not actual trees. But and then if you go to number 336. Real quick, it's 18 major trees, and they collected 8,100, and they're planting 28 minor trees, and the applicant has agreed to forfeit 4 major trees. So the 8,100, and they've they're putting back 1,800, or putting 1,800 into the shade trust, but they're replacing 18 major trees with 28 minor trees. And then 335, 335, you've got 62 major trees and 24 minor trees, and they're replacing that with 88 minor trees and 1 major tree. So, and then the one before that, 334, is 45 major trees, and they're replacing it with 9 minor trees, and 9 major trees and 65 minor trees. So again, we're talking about, they're skirting the, I think what the intent was for us to, when we crafted the tree ordinance, and I'd like to see if we can find a way to maybe task Wendy with, or just in discussion with us, maybe we can find a way to change that so that we redefine what arborvitaes are in terms of minor trees, or, do something.
Can we say shade trees, major shade trees?
I have arborvitae, they throw a lot of shade.
The
So,
ordinance
right,
has
what's it?
different species, so you could certainly have discussions review it, but if something
It's gotta be pulled.
then now with caution, if something is a native species and isn't invasive, you get a little bit more limited on what your abilities are. But certainly as to definition major versus minor, you can have a three specialists take a look. I think Mike would be able to do that.
Want to bring Mike in to have a conversation with him?
Sure. So, or even just taking, arborvitae's as one of the minor trees and redefining it or kind of pulling it out and saying, if you're planning to replant with arborvitae's, there have to be a different set of conditions. So anyway, I mean, I just thought maybe we can have.
Maybe our committee should meet, with Mike
Yeah.
and then Luke and Wendy.
Right.
Appropriate.
Right.
So remember our stage, you know how Ben and I did a lot of work that first revision, we could just meet part 2.0.
You want to meet with Michael first?
No, with Mike.
With
Yeah, he
Mike-
was- he
with
was
Mike
the
first.
First time.
So at the council meeting, you'd want to meet?
No, we meet offline.
So you two will be with Michael first.
But I just wanted to highlight the fact that, this is what's happening and this isn't the first time, at the last meeting, there was a whole bunch and, this is where our trees are disappearing in the town.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other resolution questions? Yes.
I need to recuse myself from C, letter C.
From which one?
The approved garden room deposit refund.
Which one?
R 23-325.
Should
Probably be pulled so she can just,
Yeah.
Okay, we'll pull for a separate vote.
yeah, it actually does say something.
All right, anything else on the resolutions?
Wait, can I just ask, can you look up if you can limit the amount of forfeiting escrow to like 50%? That you can only forfeit up to 50% of your escrow and you must replace the rest, but you don't skirt it, as Vinny was saying? Is there any wiggle room on any of that? I'd be curious to know what's allowable.
I can certainly look into it.
Okay, not sure it's.
Yeah, I guess the question becomes with that is, well, what's the consequence?
Yeah, you just lose. half
More
of it.
trees.
As far as if you don't plan.
Yeah.
Right, well,
Maybe see.
So that's an offline legal question.
Yes. So I mean, I can certainly start looking at that side of it while the committee is meeting to review the
Yep.
the species side of it. And
Okay.
maybe we all come together again for an ordinance amendment.
Okay, that's fine. All right. So can I get a motion to approve resolution R 23-323 to R 23-324, R 23-326, R 23-328 through R 23-340?
So moved.
Second,
Could I have a second?
second,
Could I have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Dayton,
Yes.
Councilmember Grossman,
Yes.
Councilmember Menon,
Yes.
Councilmember Michaels,
Yes.
Councilmember Dr. O'Connor,
Yes.
Councilmember Park.
yes,
Okay, could I have a motion to approve resolution R 23-325 and Councilwoman Dr. O'Connor is abstaining from this vote?
So moved.
Have a second?
second,
Omar, please call the roll.
Councilmember Dayton,
Yes.
Councilmember Grossman,
Yes.
Councilmember Menon,
Yes.
Councilmember Michaels,
Yes.
Councilmember Park.
yes,
Okay, could I have a motion to approve resolution R 23-327?
so moved,
Have a second?
Second.
Omar, please call the roll.
Councilmember Dayton,
No.
Councilmember Grossman,
Yes.
Councilmember Menon,
Yes.
Councilmember Michaels,
Yes.
Councilmember Dr. O'Connor,
Yes.
Councilmember Park.
yes,
Okay, could I have a motion to approve resolution R 23-341 through R 23-348?
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
Sorry, we're doing,
Non-consent agenda, R 23-341 through 348.
It's just
Do
before.
you have any questions?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I covered the questions in the first part, I thought, my mistake. So, okay, go ahead, Councilman, Michaels.
I guess it's just a comment and we can get through it. So, just in general on the hires, so I have three things that concern me and I appreciate Omar sent the job descriptions. Three things. One is, I think it might be possible that we actually already hired these people. I don't know.
They're confirming resolutions.
Two are, one is not.
Which is not.
The admin.
Okay, administrator. So I don't know. Right, I could save my breath. I mean, if the person's already hired. I'm not sure why you're asking me for approval. It's not, that's how my son would do.
She's not hired, she's not,
Oh,
But two of the three are hired.
the dispatcher. Sorry, go ahead.
yes, correct. So
So
they
there's-
were hired in between the meetings. The council had asked that all hires come back with confirming resolutions, even when the hires happen between council meetings. I will note, however, that by ordinance, Jimmy has authority to hire subordinates. So none of these are department heads.
Okay,
So
so
they're.
my first one is maybe just don't bring to the council because. You
It
know,
was-
You asked for it. So we're doing what you wanted.
We wanted that
I'm
review.
concerned that I did not ask for it.
Okay,
We wanted that
So
review.
it doesn't matter, that's
okay.
first. So
Next
you
question.
don't need to vote anyways, it's already done. The second one is, you know, we spoke about this before, I am going to implore next year's council. What I feel like we always tend to do is someone leaves and we just replace them. Right? It just, you know, it's momentum. And I'm not sure, maybe we did, for, I'm just saying all these in general, are we looking to see? Do we need buggy whips anymore? Yes, the buggy whip broke. Do we need to hire a buggy whip? So I'm not sure we did that. And then just the last piece is. We always speak about it. I don't think we take action on it, but again, shared services. So, you know, I don't know enough about the civilian dispatcher. I'm not on the police commission, but I read the job description. And that seems like the absolute most perfect. It's someone with a radio. You could do it.
It's definitely more than that. It's more than that.
So did we, before we hired somebody, did we look into, this council was so proud of themselves on January 1st around, what are we doing around shared services? Do we look at that? So to me, it's in general, again, it sounds like everything is past us again. We're not ever getting ahead of things. I would implore next council, instead of just someone leaves or for whatever reason, let's just rehire the same exact role, same exact everything. I think we should be reassessing. I know in my world, I don't have an executive system. That's Calendly and everything else. So it's just a general thing that I don't believe we move forward. All we do is just replace something without really challenging.
Jeff, go ahead.
I could just jump in, the CFO's office hire, that was brought.
That we've spoken about like 100 times, so that one less so. And again, it's a general thing, not these three particular ones. You've heard me say it multiple times. It's just a principle for me of, instead of just replacing something, is that the right one? Maybe we need a higher, maybe we need a lower.
Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, if I may, exactly to also Wendy's point, that was reviewed earlier on. And then also with the executive assistant, with the first, I mean, every time that someone vacates, the prior person, even before this past person I just left, revisited that, we got rid of a stipend and just included in the job title itself. So there was a little bit of, a little bit of savings there, but yes, no, that they are reviewed each time there is an opening. What can we do? What can we do differently? So these three, there's unfortunately not much to do differently with the dispatchers, but these two of the three were certainly reviewed and as changes were made, even with this job description, it was modified a little bit as well with the executive assistant.
As for the dispatcher, I believe it was looked at, but the overtime would lead to a bigger increase in the budget versus the fourth person being reduced, hiring another person.
Jeff.
All right, so I want to echo, but I don't want to wait till next council. I think one of the things, and look, from my years when I worked for New York City, departments were told each budget cycle, you have to justify these spots, basically. And it's not just, okay, I had two people who retired, I need two people to replace them. And I think to Councilmember Michael's point, that's the habit of many municipalities. I'm glad that you're, reviewing, but do we know that, are you holding as our borough administrator, are you holding all departments accountable to do that? And that's a rhetorical question. It's not to put you on the spot, but should be. There were years we were even told, look, this is the budget for your department. I don't care how you meet it. If you need to reduce staff, that's how you're gonna meet it. You reduce staff. You're going to cut back on the number of copies you make because we're going digital, you do that. But I think before we even reach the next council, I think we need to really know that going into the budget cycle, which starts soon, that that's the deep dive, and it's not going to be a situation next February, March, where we're told that, well, this is the position we've always had. We're short 3 people. We need 3 people.
And then we leverage technology, right? Everyone loves talking about AI.
Right.
I'm not saying that's what you're doing, but the point is technology is getting better. It's things are, if we're doing the same, the only thing I know for certain is if you're doing the same thing you were doing 20 years ago or 10 years ago or 5 years ago, I don't know what the right answer is, but I guarantee you what you're going to do is the wrong.
Go ahead, go ahead.
I want to talk about the police dispatcher because, oh, wait, no,
Just a
because,
general thing.
no, but I have to say, you're making comments, but without the background. And so I'd like to just say that we actually have been short a dispatcher for what, almost a year?
No,
No? Then
there was always 4,
it was
and
four,
this one
was-
resigned only about a month or so ago, not even, and then what the chief was given authority to do through the council was,
More than 6 months ago?
No.
Did you resign?
it was recent. It was pretty recent.
Fine.
And
I will say, but I
Oh,
will,
that's right.
no,
then-
but I will say there was a full discussion about whether that position was needed during the police commission. So what you are requesting actually did take place, and there was pushback as to whether that position needed to be filled. And there was this
Happens.
exact,
And again,
or,
this
or
is-
can the other 3 people share it? Or can we share the dispatch with Crestkill? I just want to say, shared services was brought up. This was all, I understand it's in the commission. But I would like to put on record, that conversation did take place.
And it happened with shared services. I know you also share the shared services stuff.
We are actually, our dispatchers are actually so busy, no one wants to share with us. It's just the opposite. People don't want to share our very busy desk.
again, this does get, I understand from sitting up here with the council, the general sentiments, and these are reviewed each time there's a vacancy. Also somewhat recently with the in the police department with the police records clerk, that was a full-time position held by someone for 18+ years. The chief came to me and said that, to his credit, said, hey, we don't need it to be full-time, it could go to part-time. Anytime that there is a vacancy, anytime, especially with the long-standing, either way, but especially with the long-standing employee after 15, 18 years, whatever it is, that is the first question. What can we do differently? What is the size of the departments? I mean, some of these departments you're talking are staffed of 2 or 3. So there's not many, but the due diligence is being done, and we'll make sure that it continues to be so. Whatever recommendations can be done are being done. Again, going back to the one stipend we got rid of, we're able to get rid of. Again, it's a little bit here and there. We're trying to take as much as we can, where it makes sense. And I guess.
Susan, you wanted to say something? Come on up. You gotta come to the microphone.
So you asked about why we need the resolutions. The auditors are recommending that we do resolutions for everyone that's unrepresented, not in a union. So the dispatcher and the executive assistant, they're both not in a union. So they want that formalized in a resolution. That's why we're doing it.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes, but
So just as a question, I know that we don't want to micromanage, but
Yeah.
with the executive assistant, how does it compare with I mean, are we able to get job descriptions of the other assistants, see how they were changed? And then other admins in other departments, just kind of so that we get an education.
Sure. I mean, this is also something that the HR manager was to ensure. So I mean, we do have a lot of, I don't think all of them are in place, the job descriptions, but that was a task for a project for the HR manager to handle. So it's something that we do want to make sure we put into place, make sure they're updated, that it's being revisited with departments.
But just specific to this position, how did this change versus what was there before?
With the executive assistant? This is when that office, when those positions were held by Valerie and Christine.
No,
Oh, well, sorry, when those positions were previously held by two prior employees, and the one retired, we looked at all the duties, I'm sorry.
I'm just listening to see whether I need to jump in, I might not know where this is going. Some of this discussion perhaps might be better suited at another time, I'm not sure, I'm just.
I'll say, okay,
We can have the discussion at another time, but I think sometimes, when we're getting a description like this, it's kind of in a vacuum. You're not really understanding what the circumstances are. So getting this is just as good as not getting it in what. I'm saying I prefer getting it, but then we need to have the full kind of understanding of.
But then you need the whole table of organization.
Exactly.
You're moving column B to
Right.
column A.
I could send you the assistant administrators job description too, just because they there's minor overlap just because they need to be some redundancy or just backup. But when I first came on after a few months, the assistant at the time had retired, and then with the help of just because I was still new here, it was only 5-6 months in. Susan helped me just to ensure kind of with the job description and the duties were still kind of being maintained. Just she had more familiarity with the staff in that in general, and then also with the duties of that office. So everything is still being covered, just a matter of through some of the new employees, just shifting some of the pieces of that are needing to be that are handled through
Put
the
you on the
office.
spot.
Oh, yeah, no, understood.
Saying that when we get something like this, we need kind of more.
So then do you want everything for for
Maybe
police,
the
the finance as well? I mean, I don't know if you want
So I
finance as
think-
well.
I think tax, you don't have two overlapping positions, which the administrative assistant.
Yeah, I think if the councilman wants to read the job description, send them to.
No, but I guess the request is just for the one department, not both.
Right, at the moment, just this one, because the tax clerk is a separate function.
Okay, any other questions about these resolutions? Okay, could I have a motion to approve R23-341 through R23-348?
So moved.
Can I have a second?
Second,
Omar, call the roll, please.
Councilmember Dayton,
yes.
Councilmember Grossman,
Yes.
Councilmember Menon,
Yes.
Councilmember Michaels. Councilmember Dr. O'Connor,
Yeah.
Councilmember Park.
Yes.
Okay,
Can I just say for the public that was the trash contract
yes,
that
Yeah.
people wanted to know when we were discussing.
it's approved tonight. All right, and old business, anybody have anything for old business?
I still would like to talk about a women's museum. Elizabeth Cady Stanton.
Okay,
We
so
still
could we have
need-
that on to be considered previously, or go ahead?
We did, and again, was just in Washington DC, and our Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Tenafly were mentioned numerous times in numerous Smithsonian magazines. Elizabeth Cady Stanton will be named, the train station is getting named after her. But again, I still think a dedicated museum to women's suffrage and the work done here within Tenafly. Many other communities, Alice Paul and Susan B. Anthony, have museums dedicated to their work done with Elizabeth Cady Stanton in their hometowns. And it's just a missed opportunity.
But didn't we kind of say, let's have the historic commission talk about this issue? Because that's where.
That's where you left
To
it.
germinate,
That's where you left.
right? So
Well,
let's
it's a
reach
slow
out to the
moving
chair.
thing. We have grant opportunities we can apply to for this on every level, federal, state, county.
All right, so Jeff, why don't we have a conversation with Rowan and
Well, I'm having that this Thursday, their meeting.
okay, perfect.
We didn't really have
It's the
much.
welcome. You're not coming
No,
along.
no. Still have, we
Okay.
both, I mean.
Okay,
Okay,
But on the Alice Paul, I'm not sure about Susan B. Anthony, but I know that whole thing was spearheaded by a private group, not by the public. That becomes the thing. Most of these are spearheaded by
Nonprofit.
a
A nonprofit.
Not for profit, yeah. that wants to.
So that's part of the investigation, right?
That's what we have to look at.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, could I have a motion to approve the minutes of May 9th, 2023, the mayor and the council meeting, and August 7th, 2023 closed session?
So moved.
Second.
Got all in favor?
All right.
Any opposed?
No.
Anyone have anything for the good of the order? No. Any comments about upcoming meetings? Okay, we've got new ordinance. Julie, would you like to make this motion, please?
Yes, can I just ask a quick question about it or?
Go ahead.
Okay, so I noticed on the ordinance, we're changing the fees, but this is just basically for the gazebo and this is in Davis Johnson Park, but I didn't see that it was like increasing the fee to rent the garden room. It was just the idea of the application fee. Did I miss that?
No, so this ordinance, the garden room wasn't previously included by ordinance.
Oh, okay.
So if you'll note, there's a new proposed subsection B, just generally noting that the application may be amended by approval of the council. So right now that application that people have been using for the garden room currently is still in effect. That was authorized by resolution many years ago. And so we're just codifying the fact that if that were to change, it'll come before you all first.
Okay, so okay, so the only reason I bring it up is I know that you and I are talking sometimes about changing, you know, some of the requirements in the garden room.
So the
that'd be like
DPW
different.
is currently reviewing the application. They've been asked to streamline it along with the review of whether the fees need to be increased in order to correctly reflect the staff rate, let's say for cleanup, setup, whatnot. But they're taking a more holistic approach at the entirety of the application because it's a little bit confusing.
I got you. And I do just want to point out for that one, is that they do require a person to rent it to also get their own insurance. So that does also add to a cost, you know, when that comes to us, we just have to remember that. I don't know if
Yeah,
that's.
and
the case
that's
with-
pretty standard with any municipal property that an outside entity would be using.
Okay. So yes, I'll make the motion. Apologies. I move to introduce on first reading ordinance 23-22 and set the hearing for September 19th, 2023 at 8:00 PM or as soon thereafter.
Second.
Go ahead. Motion second by Dan.
Councilmember
Mark, could you read the title of the ordinance and conduct a roll call, please?
Sure. Ordinance number 23-22, an ordinance to amend section 21.3 Davis Johnson Park of chapter 21 Parks, Playgrounds and Recreation Areas of the revised general ordinances of the Borough of Tenafly 2004. Councilmember Dayton,
Yes.
Councilmember Grossman,
Yes.
Councilmember Menon,
Yes.
Councilmember Michaels,
Yes.
Councilmember Dr. O'Connor,
Yes.
Councilmember Park.
Yes.
Okay, time for committee reports. Dan, would you like to go first, please?
I have none.
Jeff, please.
I just want to really thank the council for the financial and moral support for the summer concert series this summer. It was phenomenal. We had several concerts where we probably had about 350 people show up, which is a big comeback from where we were a couple of years ago and actually
Huge.
bigger than some of the ones pre-COVID.
Yep.
And the groups were great, the turnout was great, and it's not possible without not just the council, but a lot of the borough employees who really bent over backwards to make it happen. The finance office, the administrator's office, DPW. So thank you all. That's my report.
Thank you, Jeff. Lauren.
This Thursday, I would like to welcome everybody to our new resident event. It will take place here at Peace Plaza. I hope our entire council comes to meet our new residents, and I'm thanking in advance all of our department heads. Usually our chief of police and fire and first responders come. Please come join us. It should be cocktails. It should be a beautiful night, warm night, but should be a lovely way to come meet new residents.
It's always a great event.
No, this one's catered. This one's catered.
That's a.
Thank you, Lauren.
6 o'clock.
Benu, please.
Nothing for tonight.
Adam, please.
A couple quick things. The first thing is, everyone got the Jewish Standard. They had their annual, Reader's Choice. I'll tell you, what about it? It's 5 years now. And, I usually find one of our businesses or two, it'd be amazing simply because he always does well, but like 1 or 2. Literally, I had a second piece of paper. It is amazing this year with the team, everything from urine properties, eye care, underground training. Obviously the Avalon JCC always wins. It's amazing to see them win. And then their restaurants, Broccoli, Avalon, Tenafly Diner Beta. It is amazing. I have never seen Tenafly in this Reader's Choice Awards as much as I did this year. So just congratulations to our businesses.
And Prime Orthopedic too.
Yeah, but no, I'm missing a whole bunch.
Yeah.
Literally, I couldn't even say them all. So just super awesome and congratulations to the team. It's great to see Tenafly businesses doing so well. So thank you for that. Obviously, I'm sure you guys will speak about community night that's coming up next Tuesday night at 12, 5 o'clock, big event. And then for everybody on the calendars, Saturday, October 14th, the mayor will get pie, council. We have our
I can hardly wait.
event.
Are we really getting pie?
Well, yeah.
Really making
Oh yeah, you gotta pick a good hour. I've been strategically thinking which hour is best for for us. So yes, Saturday, October 14th.
That is mom's school event. I just wanted to mention that.
Perfect. It's fine too. Thank goodness
Okay.
mom is so close to downtown. Let's get that as well.
I'm just saying.
Other than that, that's all I got.
Wonderful. Thank you. Julie.
So the Environmental Commission, we're really trying to get people to sign up for the compost pilot program. So hopefully you've been seeing the flyers throughout downtown. There's like a QR code to hook up with it. There are 24 families so far. I'm not too concerned because I know it was rolled out just at the very beginning of summer. We do, it was kind of hard to catch the imagination. However, I know the mayor, you're planning on putting a reminder back into the Friday announcements, and that we really want to get a critical mass of families by October so that we can get it going. We need 50 families to start the program. And it'll be a great opportunity to bring your composting to one of 2 bins in 2 areas of town. I've been pleased to learn that a lot of people in town actually do their own composting, which was pretty exciting to learn. But for the rest of us that don't, this is going to make it fairly easy, and it'll kind of change our mindset about food waste, and really hope we can get it going. So
Okay.
please sign up.
Thank you. My only mayor's comments tonight are going to be, I want to thank Councilman Grossman and the DPW and Tenafly Presents. I know I'm repeating what you talked about before, but the concerts were really fabulous this summer. Very well attended. And my favorite ice cream man, George, was there every time with my chipwich sandwich. So $4. It was great. So I know. So it was a wonderful concert series. Thank you, Jeff. Okay, with that, we're going to go into closed session. And if Counselor, could you read the closed session language?
Resolution R23-349, at a meeting of the mayor and council of the borough of Tenafly, county of Bergen, state of New Jersey, held on September 5th, 2023. The mayor and council of the borough of Tenafly has deemed it necessary to go into closed session to discuss certain matters which are exempted from the public. Be it resolved that in compliance with NJSA 10:4-12, the mayor and the council of the borough of Tenafly are going to close executive session to discuss the following matters falling within the attorney-client privilege, to discuss Municipal Services Act, as well as contract negotiations for an SRO agreement, and under real property exemptions, lease of borough property, as well as a potential acquisition.
Could I have a motion to go into close, please? So moved. Have a second. Could I have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're going into closed
Thank you,
session.
everybody.